What's up, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the CBB Yapper. For today's episode, we're going to break down the games that I had pointed out on Sunday's episode as the games to watch for this week. Then, we'll give a quick shout out to a team who I think deserves it and has really overcome some adversity here lately. And of course, we will end it with some more games to watch between now and Sunday's episode. So, without further ado, let's get into it. Starting on Big Monday, I had pointed out this UNC and Louisville game, and what a win this was for UNC. Being without Caleb Wilson, I really did not think that the Tar Heels had much of a chance to pull this one off. I just thought, being undermanned, that they would not be able to keep up with this Louisville team, who I still believe is a very good team, but they pretty much just controlled the entire second half in this one. Louisville did come out right away and took an early 10-point lead and looked like they could potentially run away with it, but UNC did not go away and definitely did not go down without a fight and really turn it around here with about 10 minutes left in the first half. I had mentioned on Sunday's episode that if UNC did want to win this one, their guards would need to show up, specifically Trimble and Dixon, and Seth Trimble certainly did. He was an absolute stud for Carolina all night on both sides of the floor. He put up 30 points on 16 shots and added in 4 assists and 4 rebounds as well. On defense, he also helped contribute to holding both Conwell and Brown to a really bad shooting night between the two of them. When discussing Louisville's path to success in this one, I had said that Conwell and Brown would need to combine for at least 40 to win this one. They did combine for 47, but it was an extremely inefficient 47 as they shot a combined 16 of 44 from the field between the two of them. For Louisville, this is just a really bad loss here. They finally started to look like they may be putting things together here, but I think this was just a major step back for this Cardinals team. Carolina is still a very good team, and I don't really mean to discredit them, but without Caleb Wilson, I just think that this is a really bad loss for Louisville. They are still a lock for the tournament. I don't really think that's a discussion right now. They should easily make the tournament, even barring a pretty bad collapse here at the end of the year, but they're really hurting their chances of getting a favorable seed here. They get Clemson this weekend and are definitely going to need to bounce back in this one if they do want to boost their seed line at all. But for UNC, I think this was just a really impressive win for them here. When Caleb Wilson went down, I really thought that they were going to start to struggle here and slide a bit, but they have actually really held on reasonably well here. It sounds like they also might be getting him back here for the Duke game, which obviously I want to see them at full strength, but wouldn't mind playing them without Caleb Wilson as well. But we'll continue to monitor that situation as we get closer to the tip-off there. In the meantime, the Tar Heels got a pretty weak Hokies team here this weekend before they get a tough 2-game stretch here to end the regular season versus Clemson, and then of course they end the season with Duke. Staying on Big Monday night here, I had pointed out this Houston and Kansas game, and it really seems like I went 0 for 2 here on Big Monday. On Sunday's episode, I had talked very highly of Houston's chances to pull this one off here, but Kansas definitely had other plans on this night, especially at home. Similar to the first game that I just talked about in UNC and Louisville, Houston jumped out to an early lead here in the first half and actually looked really good to start this game. They got out to an 8-point lead right away, but like the game I discussed earlier, it was pretty much all Jayhawks from there. The score ended up looking a little better than the game felt, as well as the second half I do not think was really competitive at all. This was just a horrible game from Houston all around, but especially on offense. I still believe in this Houston's team's offensive ability, but their last 3 games have just been really ugly and have certainly not helped their case. In this one, they shot under 32% from the field as a team, 5 of 24 from deep, which adds up to a whopping 21%, and only put up 56 points here on this night. Just a really ugly box score to look at there, and seems like it has been kind of a trend here recently. In their last 3 games, they are averaging only 63 points per game, shooting 36.3% from the field and under 30% from the field. This is just something that this Houston team is really going to need to figure out here as we get towards the end of the year and approach March, as I don't think this is going to be a recipe for success in March when you're going to go against teams who are much better offensively, like this Kansas team. Kansas, on the other hand, I don't even really think they had that impressive of a night. From three, they were really solid, shooting 7 of 17, but only shot 44% from the field. Trey White, on the other hand, had himself a game. He put up 23 points on only 9 shots. With how Kansas played in this one, I think it's even more impressive that they pulled this one off and looked so dominant in this one. If they had been on their A game here, I really think they could have ran Houston off the floor in this one. I just think that this Houston team still has another gear that they can reach here and will make them an extremely dangerous team come March. To end the year here for Houston, they have 3 games in a row that they should be able to win fairly easily. They get Colorado, Baylor, and then end it with Oklahoma State here. So I don't expect them to drop another one here before the Big 12 tournament. Kansas, on the other hand, is in a slightly different boat. They get Arizona on Saturday for another huge matchup, but then end the year with 2 lighter games against Arizona State and Kansas State, where they cannot afford a blunder in either of those two. Moving on to Tuesday night here, I, of course, pointed out this Duke and Notre Dame game here. This game does not really need much time spent on it, but I'm going to anyways. Duke just came out and ran the Irish off the floor the entire night in this one. This was just a complete rout, and Duke dominated in all facets of the game. The one stat that really stood out to me in this one was Duke was just 1 rebound shy of grabbing 50 boards in this one and out-rebounded Notre Dame by 22. I just thought this was an extremely eye-popping stat and something that was really interesting to me as I was looking over the box score after the game concluded. Cam Boozer was, of course, as always, lights out all night and just terrorized this Notre Dame front court. He only ended up with 8 field goal attempts, but that was just due to the Irish not being able to stop him all night and having 0 answers for him. He went to the line 14 times and was 12 of 14 from the free throw line as well, which is just extremely impressive for a big man here. And he also added in 2 threes on as many attempts as well. Just another really impressive game from Cam here, and at this point, it seems to be all he does. He just continues to impress me every single game. One thing that I did see on Twitter this week that I wanted to mention on my show was from Evan Miyakawa. I'll link the tweet here in the video as well as in the description, but he said that Cam Boozer is having one of the best individual seasons by his site's metrics since 2009, and the only player with better metrics is Zach Edey's season in 2024, which is just extremely elite company to keep here. Duke just needs to continue the momentum here as they end the season with 3 pretty tough games here. They get Virginia on Saturday, which we will talk about later, and then their 2 Tobacco Road rivals the following week to end the year. If the Blue Devils can end the year 3-0 here down that stretch, I think they should lock up the number 1 overall seed, even with a loss in the ACC tournament. For Notre Dame, on the other hand, they just have no direction right now. I really liked Shrewsbury and that hire when he came from Penn State, but that experiment has really been a disaster here. I imagine that the Irish may be looking for a new coach this offseason, and if not this offseason, if things don't improve next year, Shrewsbury, I think, is certainly going to be on his way out. Staying in that same time slot as my Duke boys on Tuesday night, I had pointed out this NC State and UVA game here. Unfortunately, this one I actually am going to keep a bit brief here because this one was just a blowout, so I really did not catch much of this game and ended up just staying on the Duke game for its entirety. However, it's games like this that definitely make me a little bit nervous about my Blue Devils taking on the Hoos here on Saturday. They shot a really impressive 46% from deep in this one and 16 of 18 from the free throw line as well, all while holding NC State under 30% from the field as a team. Just an all-around really impressive game for Virginia in this one. I had thought that this one was going to be much more competitive here, but the Wolfpack really just never stood a chance in this one. The Cavaliers' rim protection really stood out here in this one, just looking at the box score for me. Grunlow did not do much on offense here, but on defense, he was a monster. He added in 8 blocks, which is just not something that I saw coming, at least not that many. And Onyenso was an absolute animal as well, defending the rim, adding in 4 blocks of his own. Just a very impressive win for UVA, like I said, and they're going to need to build on this one and bring that momentum into Saturday if they want a chance to take down Duke at home. As for NC State, just another really bad performance here in a spot that was really crucial for them to get another resume-boosting win here. They came up way short in this one, and it will definitely be an uphill battle here for the rest of the year for the Wolfpack. They get an easy game here against Notre Dame, but turn around right away with a home game against Duke Monday night. Then end the year against a tough Stanford team with a scoring machine in Ibuka Okori. So they are going to need to hunker down here at the end of the year and try to at least rattle off 2 more wins here to end the year. Moving down to the last game I pointed out on this Tuesday night slate here was this BYU and UCF game. And there was a reason I pointed this game out. BYU had been playing great ball here recently, especially with the terrible news of Saunders being ruled out for the rest of the year with a torn ACL. They went and gave Arizona a real scare and then took down a very good Iowa State Cyclones team here as well. I wanted to get another chance to look at BYU against a good UCF team and see if they could carry that momentum into this one and rattle off another big win here. But boy, did they let me down in this one. The first half was just an absolute rout in large part to a really incredible shooting performance from UCF. The Knights shot 11 of 16 from deep in the first half, which is just absolutely absurd. BYU was able to come out and win the second half by 11, but it wasn't enough to bring this one even within single digits here after they gave up 52 points in the first half. This was exactly what UCF needed, but exactly what BYU needed to avoid. This will surely be a big boost for UCF's tournament hopes, and they look like a tournament team who could definitely be very dangerous in the first weekend if they are there. BYU, on the other hand, is just hit or miss. They just really seem to rely on outside shooting a lot and heavily on AJ DeBansa. Of course, he's one of the best players in the nation, but it's just really not enough for me to trust this team to win multiple games in March, especially without Saunders. I really think if he was there, it would change my mind on this team at least a little bit, but without Saunders, it just really hurts their chances of advancing here in March. BYU definitely needs to end the year here at least 2-1 and rattle off another win or two in the Big 12 tournament if they want to boost their seed line up a bit, and that should be reasonable, I think. They get a weak West Virginia team here, a dangerous Cincinnati team who has really turned it up here recently, and then they end it with Texas Tech. This was a huge win for UCF, but they cannot afford to get too high on themselves here. They have a weak schedule to end the year with Baylor, Oklahoma State, and West Virginia, but they cannot afford a slip up and a loss in any of those games, in my opinion. Moving on to Wednesday night, I had pointed out this St. John's and UConn game, and this game certainly did not go how I expected it and was really never a game at any point. I ended up turning this one off early, actually, to go to the Florida and Texas game because it was that bad. Despite a very early 2-point lead, and I do mean a very early 2-point lead, the Johnnies just got absolutely embarrassed last night. It says a lot when your most efficient player on the night shot 40% from the field. Their offense was a huge problem all night for St. John's. Literally no one could get it going, even remotely. They had one player put up double digits, and he shot 3 of 10 from the field. The big stat line that has been circling around national media here for this game that I'm sure most of, if not all of you, have seen, the Johnnies made 2 TWO 2 field goals the entire second half. When I saw that stat, I just honestly wanted to vomit for St. John's. Like, that is one of the most absurdly horrible stat lines I have ever seen in my long time watching college basketball. Just an absolutely abysmal performance from St. John's here in this one. And I was really hoping for a competitive game here, but after a rough past couple of games for UConn prior to that Nova game, they have really turned it back up here again. I'm really starting to regret that I left them off my contenders list here for now, and at the very least, they made a much stronger case to be on that list for themselves. UConn has almost made it through the entire season here. They have 2 games left that they should win and can't really afford a loss in if they want to possibly get back up to the 1 seed line. They get Seton Hall, which I do not think has any business being in a game with the Huskies, and Marquette, who is much worse than that Seton Hall team even. St. John's, on the other hand, has a really tough matchup coming up this weekend against Villanova, which we will talk about later here. Other than that, they have a pretty weak schedule here as well. They end conference play with Georgetown and Seton Hall, and I think they will need to go 2-1 in that stretch if they want to get this blowout loss off the back of their minds entering into the Big East tournament here. Moving down this slate on Wednesday night, I had circled this Texas A&M and Arkansas game, and I really only circled this game to give the Aggies another shot to impress me and prove my take from earlier on in the year right. But I did not really expect that to happen, as I did jump pretty firmly off their bandwagon after their losses to Florida and Bama earlier on in the year. Right away, the Aggies jumped out to a lead, and it kind of looked like they were at least going to give Arkansas a real shot here. However, that changed fairly quickly in this one. They immediately gave up a run to Arkansas, and from there on, Arkansas pretty much handled them pretty easily, even with Acuff having a pretty bad night, especially from a shooting perspective. I just have to admit when I'm wrong, and I was definitely wrong about this Aggie squad. I had said that they were being a little disrespected by the media earlier on in this year when they were in the lead of the SEC, but I definitely think that they were on to something just watching this team more as the year has progressed. This team is just very unimpressive and really does not have any major wins on the year at all. They are a borderline tournament team, in my opinion, but they could certainly win a game in March. I wouldn't count them out of that necessarily. However, I think that's as far as they can go here, as I do not see them being a top 16 team when all is said and done. But it is March Madness, and anything can happen. For Arkansas, they really needed this one before their huge upcoming matchup this weekend against Florida, and we'll talk about that one a little bit later, but Arkansas did not even play great in this one. I mentioned earlier that Acuff had an off night, and that's really just due to his shooting night and his efficiency. He still put up 22 points, 5 boards, and 7 assists, but he did shoot a measly 36.8% from the field. He will definitely need to play much better on Saturday if they want a chance to take down this really tough Gators team in Gainesville. Moving on to the last game I had pointed out here was this St. Mary's and Santa Clara game. After Santa Clara played Gonzaga tough for really about 30 minutes in that game, I was really intrigued to get a look at the other 2 teams battling for second place in the West Coast Conference in this one. I was expecting a great game, and instead we got an absolute blowout here. St. Mary's just dominated this one in the last 20 minutes of the game and ran Santa Clara off the floor in the second half. The first half was pretty competitive, with it only being a 6-point game going into the half. However, you could definitely feel the momentum starting to shift towards St. Mary's by the end of the first half. By the time the second half started, you could tell where this one was going. Just another really impressive win for St. Mary's. They don't have many great wins on the year, but they're still definitely a very solid and dangerous team. They shot 11 of 26 from deep, which is certainly very impressive and something that can boost them past some of these elite teams in the first round of March. It looks like as of now they're hanging around the 8 to 10 seed mark just according to bracketology, so it does look like they will secure an at-large bid here. However, they still have some real chances to boost their resume and seeding here towards the end of the year. They get Gonzaga this weekend, which we will of course talk about later, and then they get a potential another matchup against them if they can advance in the WCC chip as well if the stars align. So they have some really big potential opportunities here to boost their seed line still yet. As for Santa Clara, they still look like they're holding on to an at-large bid for now, hanging around the last 4 in. They end the year with Oregon State here and certainly cannot afford to drop that one, or they might be on the outside looking in here. They really might need a big run in the WCC tournament if they can't win that one, but I certainly expect them to at least win that one and probably rattle off at least one win in the WCC tournament as well. Before moving on and previewing some of the games that I have circled in between today's episode and Sunday here, I wanted to take a brief moment here to give a shout out to Texas Tech and how they've responded to the loss of JT Toppin here. A lot of people, including myself, kind of counted this Texas Tech team out after that horrible injury news. However, the Red Raiders are definitely not going down without a fight, that is for sure. After losing to ASU in the game that they lost Toppin, they could have very easily just felt sorry for themselves and tucked their tails between their legs here going into the tournament. But this team certainly has no interest in doing that. One thing I do want to correct in my analysis of Texas Tech that I provided after the JT Toppin loss is last week I had mentioned only Petty and Anderson as the guards to watch and completely forgot to mention Donovan Atwell as I was watching over my last episode. And I think that he is honestly a more important player to this team than Petty, and really feel bad that I did not mention him alongside the other two guards, so wanted to give him his love here as well. The other player that I wanted to talk about quickly here is Christian Anderson. He has been a guy that I have loved all year. I absolutely love his game and think he is someone who is really being slept on here when it comes to NBA draft talks. He certainly needs to tighten some of his game up here and become a little bit more aggressive, but I think in this time without Toppin, it will help his development tremendously. In their 2 games without Toppin right now, he is going absolutely nuclear. He is averaging 26 points, shooting almost 60% from the field, 43% from deep, as well as adding in 8 rebounds and 8 assists per game as well. He is just absolutely filling the stat sheet up with some extremely impressive games here, and I really think this kid's game is going to continue to improve, and he is just going to probably grow into possibly being a lottery pick by the time the draft comes around. If not, I think a lot of NBA GMs are going to be kicking themselves for overlooking him when he gets into the league. Obviously, Texas Tech just needs to keep going here, but I am just really impressed with how they've bounced back here after the loss of their best player and a National Player of the Year contender. Of course, as always, I did want to provide you guys with some of the games I have circled in this upcoming loaded weekend of college basketball, which seems like is going to be all we're getting here till the end of the year. We'll kick this weekend slate off a little earlier this week here and start on Thursday night with Purdue and Michigan. Lately, we have not really been getting top matchups on Thursday nights like this, so this is a nice surprise. This one will come out right as the episode drops, so I'm going to try to be as spot on as I can possibly be here for you guys. This one is going to be a battle between 2 of the country's elite guards in Braden Smith and Jeremy Fears, which will be a really fun individual matchup to watch in this one. But I think another piece to watch is just how this elite Spartan defense game plans for the elite Boilermakers offense. The Spartans rank 6th nationally on KenPom in defensive rating, and Purdue ranks 2nd in KenPom for offensive rating as well. Neither team is bad per se on the other side of the ball, but they both have a clear identity here. If Purdue wants to win this one, they are going to need to get their offense to travel, which does seem to have been kind of a problem this year. Just looking at their home and away splits, they average almost 6 more points at home while shooting 7% worse from the field on the road. I'm sure that potentially has to do with their early out-of-conference schedule, playing some weaker teams at home, but it's definitely something to at least keep in mind and monitor here, as that has been one of their biggest problems in some of their worst road losses this year, like UCLA and Indiana. If the Spartans want to pull this one off, they are going to need to keep Purdue from getting hot. If Purdue catches fire, the Spartans could be in for a really long night here on Thursday night, or tonight. But if they can stifle that offense, I really like their chances to pull this one off in a top 15 matchup at home. Moving on to the only game I have circled here on this Friday night slate is the Michigan and Illinois game. And after that loss to Duke on Saturday, it looked like the Golden Gophers might give Big Blue a scare here on Tuesday night. However, they were able to bounce back and control majority of the second half in that one, leading them to a pretty comfortable double-digit win there. However, they cannot afford to play like that in this one. Illinois is a legit contender to cut down the nets this year. I said that last episode, and I obviously still fully believe that. Out of the teams in the Big Ten, I still think that this is Michigan's toughest opponent here. With that being said, Illinois has a lot to prove here on Friday night. As we've seen plenty of times throughout this year, Michigan is a legit team and can absolutely put some beat downs on some teams here. If Illinois doesn't show up to play in this one, I could easily see Michigan using this as a bounce back game to shake off some of their recent struggles here. However, at home, I don't expect that to happen and fully expect a top matchup here on Friday night. For Illinois, I think if they want to win this one, they have to get some huge nights from Wagler and the Ivisic brothers here. Wagler is going to need to control the pace for them and get their offense initiated against this ridiculous Michigan defense. However, I think the paint is where this game will be won. If the Ivisic brothers can protect the rim, I think Illinois has a really good shot of pulling this one off. However, if they get into foul trouble or Lendeborg is able to have his way in the paint, this could really get out of hand pretty quickly. Again, I don't expect it to get out of hand. I really expect this to be a good matchup, and I'm hoping for a matchup that is a awesome game for a Friday night here. But this Michigan team is just really scary, and they can blow anyone out when they bring their A game. Moving on to this absolutely loaded Saturday slate we have coming up here. I, of course, pointed out the Duke and Virginia game here. Now, I'm not going to lie, this game does not really concern me as much as it seems to be concerning other Duke fans and college basketball fans around the nation, just based on how they're talking about this game. I really like this UVA team. Don't get me wrong, they are a well-rounded team with good pieces in all spots of the floor and have a great coach who has done a fantastic job there in his first year with Ryan Odom. However, I think these teams are on different levels here. This Duke team proved that last weekend in that game against Michigan, but I hope they don't let me down here this weekend. I just think even with this who's impressive roster, the Blue Devils outmatch them at every position. I am, of course, extremely biased on this topic, but I really don't think that there is a single player on that Virginia lineup that I would take over a Duke starter here. This is starting to feel like I'm kind of just disrespecting this Virginia team here, which is not the case at all. They certainly have a chance to beat Duke, and Duke is not an unbeatable team. However, in a 10-game series, I would expect Duke to win this one 8 out of 10 times. However, it is obviously not a 10-game series, so Duke definitely needs to show up and ready to play for this one. For UVA, they are going to need a big game from DeRidder, in my opinion. I think he just has to have a great game for them to keep this close, and he's a great player, but going up against the National Player of the Year in Cam Boozer is going to be most likely the toughest task he has had all year here. Defensively, I really don't see him slowing down Cam individually, but with the help of Grunlow and Onyenso, I think they can at least make it happen. For Duke, this is pretty simple. Just get Cam Boozer the ball and let him work. We saw it against Michigan. This dude is just constantly making the right play. Whether it's drawing contact and getting to the line, using his incredible footwork to slip past the double team, or even kicking it out to a wide open teammate, this kid is just special and always does what it takes to win. His IQ is just off the charts, and it's been an honor to watch him rep the Duke jersey here. I'm getting really sad that we're really approaching his last days in a Duke uniform here, but I'm going to cherish each of these games as he is one of the best Duke freshmen of all time. Moving down this awesome Saturday slate here, I of course have the Arizona and Kansas game circled here. This one we did talk about a little briefly earlier on in the episode, but should just be another awesome matchup here in the Big 12. With both of these teams handling Houston pretty easily here in the past week and a half, I think we're just set up for another great matchup here on Saturday. However, being at Arizona, I do think the Wildcats will win this one fairly convincingly. It sounds like Zona might also be getting back Pete for this one as well, which will be huge for them to pull this one off. In their first matchup, however, Badunga really dominated Pete. He held him to 6 points on 2 of 11 shooting from the field and only 5 rebounds, while Badunga put up 23 points on 8 of 11 from the field and added in 10 rebounds. If Zona wants to pull this one off, I think they're going to need to get Pete back here, and he is going to need to play a much better game than he did the first go around here. Of course, Burries will also need to show up as well, just like he did last time. Last time, Kansas did not have Peterson, and they were still able to pull that one off at home. However, I am expecting a much different matchup this time, especially being in Arizona. With Peterson set to play, hopefully this should be another awesome game here on Saturday. For Kansas, they are going to need Badunga to play like he did last time. Maybe not quite that good, but they will definitely still need an awesome game from him here and to shut down Pete again. Another thing that I'll be looking forward to here in this one is Peterson needs to be the best player on the floor, in my opinion, if they want to pull this one off. He has not really been playing great here recently in this recent stretch, but I expect him to turn that back around in this one and set us up for another great matchup here on Saturday afternoon. Moving down the Saturday slate here to the next game I have circled is that Bama and Tennessee game. This is just another good matchup on Saturday that I'm interested in seeing here. I have not been real high on either of these teams or the SEC as a whole for that matter the entire year. However, I do think that this should be a great matchup. Of course, this is another set of teams who pretty much have completely opposite identities here. Nate Oates' Tide loves to run the ball up and down the floor and want to play in transition, getting up shots early in the shot clock. On the other side, Rick Barnes' Volunteers love to slow down the game and play half-court ball and really make you grind out offensive possessions. I think whoever can control the pace in this one will walk away with the win here. If Tennessee can slow Bama down and make them work for buckets, the Tide will really struggle in this one, I think. However, if they can push the floor and push the pace here, I really think that they will have a good chance of pulling this one off against Tennessee here because I'm not sure if Tennessee can keep up with that type of pace. The one player I will be watching in this matchup is Nate Ament. I feel like he is just a player who has not been getting much love here compared to the amount of love being showed for the other freshmen around the nation, but he has just been awesome pretty much all year aside from an early stretch that he kind of struggled early on in. But I am really excited to get my eyes on this one, and I'm hoping for an Ament show to be put on here on Saturday afternoon. Moving down the slate here, I have the Villanova and St. John's game pointed out here. Now, this is just going to be a battle between two teams who just got absolutely stomped by the Huskies here in the past week. Of course, Villanova's loss looks a little bit better to UConn, but not really that much better. Both of these teams could really use a win here desperately, but I think the Wildcats could use it just a little bit more. They have been hovering around the top 30 mark all year pretty much, while St. John's has remained in the top 25 for a majority of the year, despite a pretty early stretch in the beginning of the season here. Whoever wins this game is going to get a much needed boost to their resume as we get towards the end of the year here. With St. John's being at home, I think that gives them a little bit of an edge in this one, but I certainly think the Wildcats can pull this one off. St. John's needs to get past that terrible shooting performance that they had in the second half of that UConn game here. They cannot afford to keep that on the back of their mind in this one and potentially have those struggles follow them here. For Nova, I just think they need a huge game from their trio of guards here. I had pointed that out prior to the UConn game, and only Perkins showed up for them. However, they are going to need a complete effort from their backcourt in this one if they want to pull this one off in Madison Square Garden. Moving on to potentially my favorite matchup of the day, and that is going to be between Arkansas and Florida. This is a matchup that I have been anxious for a little bit here. I had mentioned last week that I do not understand some of people's analysis on the SEC this year. I think there is one team that is a contender in the SEC, and that is Florida. I have seen multiple people place Arkansas ahead of Florida in that regard, which I just really do not understand and just really boggles my mind here. As someone who has watched over 30 SEC games this year, I truly do not understand how anyone can think that this Florida team is not the best team in the SEC by a wide margin, in my opinion. However, they get a chance to prove me right or wrong here this weekend. In this one, Acuff is going to need to have an incredible game if Arkansas wants to pull this one off. With the length that Florida has and their elite defensive capabilities, Acuff is going to have to dominate here, which I think he should be able to be honest. Florida's guards, Boogie Flan and Xavier Lee, are not really the greatest defenders, and I think that they will struggle to guard Acuff all night. However, I do think that that is really the only advantage the Razorbacks have in this one. Florida's front court is just ridiculous, and they have so much size and versatility that they can throw at you. I really think Florida is going to win this one by 8+ points here on Saturday, but I have no problem admitting when I'm wrong. And if they prove me wrong, I will get right back here on Sunday's episode and say how wrong I was and apologize to Arkansas for counting them out here. But we will check back here on Sunday and measure how awful of a take that was or how spot on I was. Moving down this absolutely loaded Saturday slate here, the last game I have pointed out is going to take place in the West Coast Conference between Gonzaga and St. Mary's. This one is one that I did mention earlier on in the episode, but this is just a huge opportunity for the Gales here. A win here would be a huge boost to their resume and could potentially help them climb a seed line or two, just depending on how they perform in the WCC tournament here at the end of the year. I really like this St. Mary's team and thought their win over Santa Clara was very impressive to just run them off the floor the entire second half like that. However, this one is of course going to be a much tougher ask. Gonzaga is of course still an elite team like they always are. I don't necessarily think that they're a contender to cut down the nets per se, but I do think that they will at least make it out of the first weekend and be considered a top 16 team by the end of the year. While Gonzaga is typically known as a fast-paced team, they sit just at 84th in the nation for adjusted tempo according to KenPom. St. Mary's is far slower as well. They're sitting near the bottom of the nation in adjusted tempo, while both teams sit in the top 20 for defensive efficiency on KenPom as well. Just looking at those stats, I think we're going to be in for a real grinded out game here. If St. Mary's can keep this Gonzaga offense in check, I do think that they're going to have a real shot at pulling off a massive upset here. However, I still give the nod to the Zags here as I just think that they have too much talent and are just a little bit too much of an ask for St. Mary's to take down here. However, that is all I have for today's episode. I appreciate everyone who decided to tune in, and if you enjoyed today's episode, go ahead and leave a like, subscribe, and join us back on Sundays and Thursdays for new episodes.